Oh, if we're gonna have some pie, we're gonna get some pulpit.
Sorry, what?
You're gonna have pie without pulpit.
One more time.
Pulpit.
Cool way.
Yeah, you can't have pie without pulpit. We're not
Yeah.
even the wheat thins.
Okay, sure, let's go.
People love to make fun of that pronunciation, what, which, where, when, why, etc. And I know that for a fact because I'm one of the rare English speakers younger than 60 maybe who does it. And I'll talk a little bit about my personal history with it. It's not really what I want to focus on here. I want to focus on the history of the sound because it has a very ancient pedigree. So in Proto-Indo-European, most question words begin with a qu sound. Now that's a velar k. So it's not exactly a sequence of ka plus wa. It's a ka with lip rounding, right? Qua. It's supposed to. It's pretty hard to make this distinction, but it's not quite the same thing as just qua. It's qua, perhaps. Now, in Germanic languages like English or German or the Scandinavian languages, k's become h's by Grimm's law. So a qua sound is going to become a hua sound. So question words that we inherit from Proto-Indo-European and qua become huas. So if you look at the word what in Proto-Indo-European, that was probably quod, much like Latin quod, which preserves that qua quite nicely. But then you get like Old English what, Old Norse what, Gothic hua. In later Germanic languages, generally that H is lost, and except in English and some dialects here, there, and yon, some Frisian, some Danish, Elfdalian, to some extent, put an asterisk on this, some regional Icelandic speakers, those W's are going to become V's. So in German today, right, you have was. In Norwegian, Swedish, or Danish, you have va, or variants thereof. And in English alone, into the early 20th century, especially in American, Scottish, Irish, and some other dialects, that hua remained distinct from wa. Now, there is a pretty minimal amount of words that are distinguished by these different sounds, right? Which one versus a which. Whether I did it or not versus the weather is good or bad. So because there's such a low contrastive load, speakers have generally moved hua to just wa. So your typical person since the mid-20th century learning English has learned to say what, where, when, why. See, I can do it, rather than what, where, when, why. And if you listen to mid-20th century or earlier recordings of especially, again, Americans, Scots, people from Ireland, some parts of Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, maybe, sometimes Englishmen from particular areas or particular levels of affluence, you will hear that hua, but it's a lot more subtle than the Family Guy whip, right? And when I say subtle, I mean that kind of like that sound I was trying to describe from Proto-Indo-European, that's a k with lip rounding. It's really not a sequence of H and W. When I say when, right, W-H-E-N, there isn't a place where I can stop saying an H before I say a W, right? It's one sound. It's right. It's not h plus wa. It's not when or when. It's when, right? It's all in my lips. And I think that people who learn to make the sound artificially or want to make fun of it on a TV show or make fun of older speakers who do it don't realize that it is actually all in your lips. So it's technically called a voiceless labial or labial velar approximant. Some people will insist on calling it a labial velar fricative. I feel like mine is an approximant. There's some frication there. A little bit hard to put your finger on, sometimes even your own articulations, right? But when you make fun of it, realize it has very ancient roots And you may well have grandparents or even parents who make the sound. Maybe you even do, especially if you're my age or older. And you may not even realize it. They may not even realize it, right? My mom does this and doesn't ever think about it. And people don't necessarily recognize it in speakers who they're casually talking to, because it is subtler than that Family Guy cool whip thing, right? All right. Let me give you a quick word from my friends and sponsors at Grimfrost. They're great guys, and I'll be right back to talk about my personal history with the sound. Hey folks, we'll be back to your regular presentation in a moment, but right now, I'm here at Grimfrost World Headquarters Longhouse with Johan Hegg, and I just want to remind you that if you have Viking needs, you have a Viking supplier. Grimfrost really cares about getting things right, and if you need replica, well, anything, right? Shields, helmets, weapons, board games, cool t-shirts, hats, all sorts of accessories like that. You can get them at grimfrost.com together with my books, and they ship just about anywhere in the world. So check them out. It does help support the channel. So, I make this sound. People notice it because I'm on YouTube, and they can easily hear me talking for hours and hours and hours because I've made thousands of videos. And I have been doing this since I was a kid. I don't know if I've been doing it since I first learned to speak. My siblings don't do it. But the trick is, one of my parents does, my mom does, my dad doesn't, and all my grandparents did it. So I grew up really strongly identifying with my dad's parents, and I imitated their way of speaking, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. I don't remember ever deciding, like, I'm gonna do that, but I noticed that they did it, and I'm sure I do it because either at some very young age consciously, or perhaps unconsciously, I said, I'm gonna do what they do. And I do a lot of other articulations in English that are kind of old, right? I say tune and dune rather than tune and dune, new rather than new. I have a couple older things like that I'm sure I got from them because my siblings don't have them. My siblings make fun of me about this maybe almost as much as people on YouTube do, but it's something I can't help, sort of, right? Like I can consciously do it. I can consciously say when, why, what, but it feels weird, right? It feels like I'm imitating somebody else's way of saying it, so it's pretty deeply baked into me. But I don't judge people for not doing it, and I didn't start doing it because it's got this ancient pedigree, right? Yes, it's in Old English, right? It's what. Yes, I think the same sound is represented by the HV in Old Norse what up until probably pretty late in some areas. Now in Denmark, you will actually find people who do this too, so I'm told. I haven't ever met any of them, but the reference materials and the history of Danish all say that in North Jutland there's people who say hwad instead of vad. And in Eastern Iceland, I have met older people who say hwad, not kvad. In fact, there was an actor in the early 21st century who was not that old, who came from that area, who did that. I can't remember his name. So it's still out there kind of vestigially in Scandinavia too, and very vestigially in English, but I'd be pretty surprised to meet people my age or younger who didn't have unusual circumstances like mine, where they kind of like learned their English from a much older relation, or who came from maybe a somewhat isolated region or something like that. It is dying out, but I am willing to carry the torch, I suppose. Well, there's a little bit about hwa, and wherever you are and whatever you think about it, I am wishing you all the best and whatever good you do.